Hello, I'm Mary McCool-Berry. Welcome back to Reading Swizzle. In this podcast, I am so delighted to welcome Joy Palmer. Joy Palmer is a reading activist warrior who began her journey a long time ago because she has a daughter that struggled with literacy and dyslexia. I met Joy at a Wright's Law conference here in Cleveland, Ohio. And I was so inspired because she has really forged a trail, a one-woman trail through this maze. And I wanted to bring her on because I believe that she is a guidepost for other parents, administrators, educators. And she has taught herself and made connections along the way. She appeared in a recent New York Times article, Kids Can't Read, the revolt that is taking on the education establishment. Fed up parents, civil rights activists, newly awakened educators, and lawmakers are crusading for the science of reading. Can they get results? This is also Joy Palmer's crusade. Joy, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Joy Palmer. My daughter is in Columbus City Schools, and we have been on an ongoing fight since probably my daughter's been about 9 years old, of trying to help her get some help and trying to figure out where the breakdown is, where the communication is. Along the way, I've met a lot of people. We did appear in the New York Times. There is another article, I can't remember it was an article. I'll have to double check on that one. And I'm also working on Fox News as well, trying to get them linked with their following. Everybody's jumping on the trail of literacy and improving literacy. So along the way, I'm still fighting. She's still in school. And what I'm trying to stop and prevent is other kids from struggling the way that mine have struggled.
So what was, Joy, if I may start with my first question that pops up, what was the problem with the literacy instruction that your daughter received?
At the time, we didn't know that it was really a problem. We just knew that I'm a very observant person, and I knew she wasn't interacting in class like most other kids were doing. She was kind of like flying under the radar. But there was things that we were struggling when it came to homework that we noticed that would take hours and hours and hours to do. And that's as a third grader. And it became, there's something wrong. We really don't know what it's wrong. And it was, well, let's rule out some of the things, because my daughter struggled. She had chronic ear infections. So it's like, let's try to figure out, maybe it's her hearing. Maybe she's not hearing like other students. So we're trying to find the solution to what is going on. And maybe that was the issue. What we later on discovered that it was not her hearing. Her hearing is okay, it's fine. But we discovered that in 2014, she was dyslexic. My mindset of what dyslexia is that you just mix up numbers and letters. I didn't have a formal definition of what dyslexia is. That's just what we've always heard what dyslexia is. As we figured out what dyslexia is, it was more in depth of what was going on, and we had a better explanation of what was going on. So this has been a learning journey and an ongoing journey of trying to figure out what's going on. When we got any services through the school, they would do, small group reading sessions. It started about first grade, but it never started until January. School typically starts in September. So we are going halfway through the school year before they're getting her any help trying to figure out what was going on. She will only show growth a little bit, but after break, she would show a huge recession of what was going on. So like I said, in 2014, we discovered that she was dyslexic, and I had to go outside of the school to find other resources to try to figure out what was going on when it came to the literacy. So it wasn't the fact that she wasn't learning, it was the fact that the teachers didn't have the right information to teach her on the level that she learns on.
But surely there were special ed educators within the school. So why didn't they flag her much earlier on?
Sad thing is their documentation report cards, everybody was saying the same thing since first grade. She's a bright student, she's a hard worker, but she's struggling. So even with their documentations that was coming from the teachers, they were witnessing the same thing I was listening, but the school psychologist wasn't accepting what was being said. So we went through loops, hoops. We went from teachers giving extra help to 504s to them refusing to give her an IEP because they just said she's just, based on her IQ, they were just basically saying that she was going to be slow. And that wasn't the perception of what was going on. It was more in depth than she just wasn't grasping the concept of what was being taught to her and how it was being taught.
So what grade was that? Was that fourth grade?
Which one?
The fourth grade when the psychologist said, no, we're not granting an
So
IEP.
the irony of this is since kindergarten, we've had the same school psychologist. I did not get a new school psychologist to do an evaluation on her until fifth grade.
Wow.
And that was when it came to fifth grade, I actually learned some of my rights and what I could and could not do. And they basically told me I can request a new person. My mindset is that you have the same person testing over and over. They already have the preception of this is just this child. She's just going to be this way. But what lit a match was probably the second time in third grade that we had her tested, and the school psychologist that I had just looked at me and said, your child's just going to be slow. So I took a year and a half off of trying to get her tested because it was not going anywhere with the school. It was not going anywhere with the district because you don't know. You don't know
Right.
who to ask the questions to. And I'm not one to just take no for an answer. I had to go in depth and start doing my own research. So I end up getting a parent, what are they called?
Parent advocate?
Yes, ma'am. And I had two of them, not just one, I had two. And they was like, you could request a whole new team, with the exception of the principals and the administrator. And I was like, no, I didn't know that. So I didn't put it in writing and requested a whole new team. We've got a new advocate, new social worker, new psychologist. And we also got a new special education coordinator. So we pulled in different people from different schools to actually test and evaluate her.
So I'm just like stuck on this psychologist who said no. Do you think race plays a factor in these decisions?
You may be honest.
Yes.
Yes. I don't see things black and white. Let me just clear that up. But I think because of urban city and suburbs and the inner city schools and how they treat or perceive people in the inner city schools, you're judged based off your zip code. So if you're in a poor zip code, they're just assuming, it's like, okay, well, we're just going to say that it's this. But I also think the other piece to it is I was young, I'm Black, and they feel like because I was young and Black that I didn't know any better. So I was just going to accept no, and we're not going to do this. And I also think part of the reason of them saying no is because every school district doesn't have the same resources to accommodate. So the one thing that they kept saying is dyslexia is not recognized as a disability. But state law says dyslexia is a state disability. So what they wasn't betting on me knowing is that I did the research. I found out that that was, in fact, a disability. I looked up federal codes. I looked up state codes. And when I initiated and sent the letter, I included state codes. I included federal codes. And it was like, I'm not dumb just because I look the way that I look or talk the way that I talk. I really have knowledge of what's going on. It might take me a minute to find it, but the answers are there. So yes, ethnicity has a huge issue. Social economics has a huge issue of determining what services a kid gets or does not get.
And let me reiterate for the audience that I met you in April because I sat next to you at a rights law conference. And again, Joy was in the audience, and it was a day-long training because she was seeking information to better help other parents and also help her own child. So I think it makes, I don't know how you're feeling, but it makes me angry that we failed. The schools are failing to educate everyone in this country. How are you feeling, and what motivated you to continue to carry on?
What motivated me is because I am too a graduate of Columbus City Schools. I had a different breed of teachers, and I'm not saying like, I don't want people to take that out of content. I had teachers who took me under their wing and said, no, that there's something wrong. Let's figure out a solution. I had teachers who followed me step by step by step, who gave me the support, who learned that there's something that is driven. Like, school was my outlet. So teachers realized that I had a lot going on outside of school, and they like, oh no, she's willing to learn. So my foster dad is a teacher as well. So my conception of what is, you asked about the drive, right? What kept me going?
Yes.
That was probably my main motivations, because I had teachers who just didn't give up on me. And learning that my teachers that I had resources that teachers that my kids had don't have those same resources. The older generation of teachers is not scared to speak up when things need to be said because it's right. Whereas the younger generation of teachers are like, this is my job. I have this boundary. I have to stay in it. They're kind of scared to step outside of the boundaries because they don't want to jeopardize their jobs. So my fight came from the fight that the teachers, when I was growing up and in school, gave me and instilled in me. And I'm like, something has to give. I'm not just going to sit back and just watch my kids fail. I have to figure it out. So like I said, a lot of them are scared to speak up, and it shouldn't be that way.
You are 100% correct. And I was battling the local school district where I worked for 32 years as an educator, and I left because it just wore me out. And the speaking up takes a lot because you're faced with a tsunami of opposition. So I am so amazed by you. You should win an award because you haven't given up. What happened after your daughter was put on an IEP? Did things suddenly start to get better?
No.
And why not?
That became a whole nother fight and war. A lot of it is I'm going to say they had the wrong people in the wrong positions, facilitating and running programs that shouldn't have been in. One, they assumed because we requested an IEP that we're done. She's got an IEP. We're just going to go with it. The lady, and I'm not going to mention names because I don't want to cause any controversy. She basically just looked at me and said, you now have your IEP, so we're going to close this. And I was like, no, I just became your problem. not only was it a problem for me, because I felt like a lot of people are like, you don't know what you're talking about. It was a problem for my daughter in the aspect of teachers, because she was labeled as insubordinate, a problem child. But in actuality, she was neither. She was learning how to communicate, because as time progressed, the level of communication, the level of confidence decreased. So when she commented on something, it looked as she was being rude, being disrespectful. But in actuality, she's starting over. She learned that she has this disability. She's learning that now I have to try to make this work, and I got to know what's right, and I got to know what's for me. So it's a learning curve for her. But the teachers, were going back to what's available to the teachers. What is that fine line that they can cross without getting in trouble? What can we do and not do? This parent doesn't know what we're doing. She doesn't know anything. The one thing is that I face from administration and from some teachers is, you're not going to tell me how to do my job. You don't know anything. But this is my child. I do know. I know how she walks. I know how she talks. I know how she thinks. I know how she moves. I know how she acts when she shuts down because she doesn't understand something. So it became an ongoing fight. But the fight was me and the teachers. And when they couldn't get to me or I wouldn't back down, it was them attacking my daughter by saying she was insubordinate, or saying she was being rude, or suspending her for the littlest things. And it was crazy. It's crazy.
So tell me this, because as you know, I'm a dyslexia practitioner, a therapist, and I'm also an advocate. But why didn't they have Wilson trained or OG trained teachers delivering instruction to your daughter? You have to have somebody who is a specialist dealing with people with dyslexia.
So the biggest journey of that portion of that was, I didn't know. They used to not want to put dyslexia in her IEP. They listed her as other special instructions. So they would come up with these cliche ways, these short fixes of saying that they're providing this instruction without providing her this instruction. So until I think it was about 2 years, sixth grade, I actually got the word dyslexia put into her IEP. Good. Maybe it was 7th grade. It was probably 7th. Yeah. And the way that they worded it was that they're not even acknowledging the fact that my child is dyslexic, because they would say Nationwide Children's Hospital and mom stated that she was dyslexic. The school district would not acknowledge it. So they weren't providing those resources. After we got, what is that program we got? Stevenson. So her last year in middle school, we end up getting Stevenson. The problem with Stevenson was the teachers are learning the program the same way that she was learning the program. So it was not effective. When it came to giving her OG tutoring, the district would say, we don't have anybody in our district. And I knew that wasn't true, because I would start throwing out different schools or where there was OG tutoring. But because I was in a certain area, and that might have just been a teacher who was assigned to that school who had those credentials, versus saying, okay, we have somebody here, let's get you linked up with them. That was never the solution to it. It was like short-term fixes. Let's do this, let's do that, let's cut her work, let's do this. Again, I still feel like the struggle now is that they're not acknowledging, the school district is not acknowledging the documentation that was provided to them saying that my child is dyslexic. They're just saying Nationwide Children's Hospital and mom state that she is dyslexic.
But tell me the grade she's in right now.
She will be a senior this year. She has just completed her junior year.
Okay. And so what reading level would you say she's working on?
She's on last we checked, she is on she's still on a third grade reading level, with a whole lot of amenities added to her IEP to help her. So anything over a fourth grade reading level is supposed to be still read to her.
Okay. So, I guess what I want to, and I have a master's degree in reading. What I want to say to every school district leader and politician and educator who's listening is that about between 90 to 95% of the population can learn to read. They can learn to decode. Even those, there have been some studies that even those with Down syndrome can learn the code. They can learn that alphabetic unlock. Comprehension and vocabulary might be difficult, maybe not. So the fact that anyone is going into senior year, a rising senior, and is still reading at a third grade level, there is a problem that's occurred within the school district. I'm right now working with adults who had never learned to read. So one woman who's so consistent and so great, she's 53 years old, and we're right here at the basic level, but she's taking off, but I'm giving her Wilson instruction. I'm volunteering with her. But how in the world, in the United States of America, does this happen? And I was speaking last week on my podcast with Dr. Joseph Mawe, who runs a Systemic Diversity Inclusion Group out of Washington, D.C. And we were talking about the 14th Amendment. Do people need to litigate? Do you need to take the school district to court, as they did in Detroit and other places, in order for everyone to receive equal education? Because as we talked about last week, I talked about with Dr. Mawe, in the Constitution and in the Bill of Rights, there is no mention of the right to an education. So how do we get past all of the obstacles that you encountered? What do you think is the solution?
Wow. People like you, people like me, and other parents who are speaking up to keep pushing and keep trying to recruit others with a story such as ours, and have them speak up. Words are powerful if heard by the right ear. And there's not enough people, especially in my district, there's not enough people who are not scared to speak up, because they're very frightened, because I do live in the largest school district in Ohio. But again, I'm willing to take on the weight of that to make sure that there's others who are not left behind, as they say, no child left behind. But in actuality, a lot of people are being left behind, because some feel like their voices aren't heard. Some voices feel like there's no weight to it. But the more people that you have speaking up, the more people that causes change. Look at the Me Too movement. Look at the Black Lives Matter movement. Look at the Juneteenth movement. Juneteenth was established by a 95-year-old woman who walked from Texas to DC to deliver and collect, on the way in her journey, signatures to get it into the law. And again, I'm not making it a black and white thing. I'm looking at words have power, actions have power. The more that you get to collaborate, to speak up, the more that change is forced, because now your voice is being heard across the world, across the nation. And people are like, wait, that's my story too. let me join in. And it's forcing people's hands to have to make that change, because then they don't want to look like the accuser or the bad person, if that makes sense. A
Right.
lot of people look at it as, it doesn't affect me, so I'm not going to make a decision. We have a lot of people in high places who make decisions for us, but aren't personally affected by their decisions because they don't fit into those categories.
Right, but I'd like to point out that, many scientists claim, literacy scientists, cognitive scientists claim that 1 in 5 people, 20% of the US population
Are
has
dyslexic.
And not only dyslexia, but we have a literacy crisis in this country.
Mhm.
So I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. You're in Columbus, Ohio. And recently, Ohio Governor Mike DeWine
Yes.
just said we are moving toward, we're going to have this dyslexia legislation. It's now law, or we're going to catch kids earlier
Mhm.
and we're going to do right by them. What are your thoughts about Governor DeWine's new outreach to schools and this new law, which
I
requires
like the law because it shows growth, it shows a start, but there are so many of us or our kids who are still going to fall through those cracks because they're starting in 3rd grade and under. What about everybody who has surpassed that point? And I'm at the point of, I've surpassed that point. So I'm not discrediting the law. Now I have to change my trajectory of speaking and advocating for my child in a different way, not so much fighting, okay, she's dyslexic. Everybody is realizing there's dyslexia across the board. Now it's, what are we doing for the ones who have surpassed that point of start? Like, where are we going to go with that? So that's where I am. And that's part of the reasons why the New York Times article came out. I have to look at the other article. And I'm also working, trying to get Fox News. Fox News reached out to me, but because of the change in news, changed the dynamic of their focus. But when I say literacy is at the top of the charts, because you have your governor speaking out, because you have change in California, because you have change in Chicago, because you have change in New York, a lot of people are like, wait a minute, now we have to jump on the bandwagon. Now it's becoming very political because our future is starting with our kids, not just mine, not just yours, not just, and our future is how many of our presidents upcoming are going to be scholars. We're not going to know because there's so many people who are struggling at this point. So I like the start of change. I like the fact that, like I said, our voices are being heard. I reached out to COBIDA in 2017.
What's COBIDA? Tell the audience what that means.
It's the Columbus division of the International Dyslexia Association. So I reached out to them via Facebook. I literally joined practically, and I'm still joining, every avenue of dyslexia on Facebook, or for that range, not just dyslexia. I have autism, I have ADHD, I have some others that I joined because it's just personal experience that I deal with. So reaching out, and now I am a member of that board, just lets me know that my voice doesn't go unheard, it's being heard. And like I said, with the governor causing that change, not just in our state, but in other states, is going to cause a whole ripple effect. So hopefully we can get everybody on board. But the crisis does start at a younger age as far as preventative measures. But now we also have to compensate for the children who have already passed that preventable measure time frame, which is third grade.
Yes. You know, and I talk to my neighbors here in Northeast Ohio, and they don't really pay attention to reading or literacy issues. But I want to make this point, and this comes from the New York Times article, which I will attach. About 1 in 3 children in the United States cannot read at a basic level of comprehension, according to a key national exam. And the outcomes are particularly troubling for Black and Native American children, nearly half of whom score below basic by 8th grade. I would also argue, I went to Florida a few weeks ago, and I was in rural Florida. I was shocked. I was shocked by the poverty. I was shocked by the school buildings. And I would argue that rural America has also been left behind. And they called this part of Florida the Forgotten Coast. So I don't think this is, and you mentioned Fox News, I don't think this is a Republican issue. I don't think it's a Democrat issue. So anyone who's trying to make that political, please, in my opinion, this is not political, because we have people who cannot read, and this is going to affect our national security. And we all know what the statistics are, but it affects people's lives.
Yeah.
So I just want to make it clear that I think that the right to read should be somewhere in our law. It should be an amendment to our Constitution, so that parents don't have to fight the fight. Teachers don't. You describe very accurately, it's a culture of fear within the schools. And that's exactly what we encountered when we challenged the whole, oh, we're using balanced literacy, just give kids baskets of books. They'll read the books, they'll love reading. There's no phonics instruction. There's really no phonemic awareness instruction. And the shocking part, Joy, it's still going on across the country today.
It is. Because
they were sold a story, as Emily Hanford so aptly put it. And if you haven't listened to Sold a Story, it's a wonderful podcast.
Oh, I did. I listened to that podcast like 3 times, believe it or not. And I started, like I said, I'm forever researching. I'm forever looking. They have the right to read. What is the other documentary that's coming out? That's been out. Hold on. I'm sorry. I gotta
with Kareem Weaver.
Yes.
That was just shown on Juneteenth. That was free of charge. I know here in Cleveland, it was streaming for free, but it's the right to read. And in the New York Times article, Kareem Weaver is also, he's quoted. What would you tell parents? Like if you were to give them 5 action steps, this is a parent who's sitting in your shoes right now, really upset because their kid is not reading. The kids may be in 3rd or 4th grade. They, they feel like the school system left them behind. What do you tell parents? What are some of the hopeful things that they can actually do?
The hopeful thing is that the number one thing that I want everybody to understand is you have a voice. That is the strongest weapon or tool that you have. Don't get quiet. Don't be scared to ask a question, and don't accept just what people tell you as the solution. Always find an alternative. Do your own research. Don't be scared to say, hey, what can I look in? Hey, reach out to different organizations, because again, there's no right or wrong answer to a question, but it just makes you more knowledgeable of what is going in. Stand your ground. Speak your mind. I mean, again, communication goes a lot farther than what most believe. Document everything so people can't flip it on you. Part of my journey is that I said that I needed something and they go, it's not in writing. The golden rule is if it's not in black and white, it didn't happen. Put it in writing. Keep a time stamp, like send an email, send a text message, as long as it's something that validates what you said and the time frame that you said it, stick to that. What's the other thing?
The other thing, Joy, that I heard you say was you joined a bunch of different Facebook groups to try to get as much information.
Network is huge. Network is huge.
So what are some of the Facebook groups that you would say, like top 3 a person should look into?
Top 3 is definitely look into the Dyslexia Association in your neighborhood, in your state. There are several different ones that you can look into. See if there is a parent group at your school. What is the government level?
The federal level?
Yeah, I'm looking for.
So while you're looking for that, there was another quote that really disturbed me in this article in which you appear. The movement for the science of reading has not been universally popular. School districts in Connecticut and teachers unions in Ohio, for example, pushed back because they thought it was heavy-handed interference in their classrooms. And you know what? I am a huge supporter of teachers, but children are the consumers, and we have to have the children reading in this country. So I don't care what the teachers union has to say. You know, some guy said to me recently, the science has been around for 90 years. Really, the brain imaging has just come to the fore. So we know exactly what happens in the brain of someone who struggles to read. So that is something quite new. Joy.
The biggest thing is not about the science. Science is very relevant. And I'm not saying that. What people are so heavily weighted on is the money revenue that comes in behind these programs that they're just throwing out. And it's not, so if you don't have money, you don't have any value. So, you know, your low class people who are struggling, trying to get help, it's like, whatever. But we got to go back to the science of reading. It's very, very relevant. It's how I process information, whether I'm using the right side of my brain or whether I'm using the left side of my brain. Like, it's very relevant of how, because everybody is different. Everybody is unique. Everybody learns differently. Everybody picks up on things differently. Like you and I are talking, I could somewhat forget some of the questions that you've asked, but at the same time, I'm getting back to the topic or redirecting myself. Again, it just takes longer for people to process. But in today's society, it's not. Science is put on the base of the problem because people don't want to seek the truth of what is going on. People just want to buy their way out. So as long as you have money or you're getting any type of revenue, you're going to sell a dream thinking that it's going to work because that's your revenue, that's your money that's coming in. And you don't want that to stop because that's the basis of how you live. But that's not what's going on.
It's not what's going on. And the science of reading, I want to be clear for every listener, my husband wouldn't even know this. There is no curriculum on the market at all that teaches the science of reading, because the science of reading is a philosophy. It is a framework. And that's why teachers must be highly trained, because it doesn't only involve phonics or phonemic awareness, sounds. It involves comprehension, vocabulary, and fluency.
It has all 5 parts. Yes, ma'am.
It has to have all 5 parts. And so that's the problem now, because we've been told for the last 30, 40 years that balanced literacy and whole language is the way. And we know because of brain imaging, it is not. A very important reading scientist, he's a cognitive scientist, His name is Dr. Seidenberg. And he says, what's coming along at least is in the right ballpark. But he warned against treating anything as gospel. And he said, the reading wars are not over until we have results. And when we're talking about 43 million people in this country who are low literate to illiterate, unacceptable. Completely unacceptable. So,
and reading wars is going to be, I think some people take reading wars out of content. Yes, it's about balanced literacy and structural literacy, but we're always going to have the wars because how you learn and how I learn is completely different. How my daughter learns is different. How anybody else who's dyslexic learns is differently. So it's like, you definitely have to, and this is my insight, we have to have both. You have to understand the teachers that are teaching, you have to understand the students that you're educating, and find a compromise for both. If that means using structural literacy so everybody gets every piece that is in there, then that's what we need to use, because obviously the last umpteen years of balanced literacy is not working. It's not working.
It's not working, and it's not working for 40% of kids who are sitting in classrooms.
Exactly.
All over. And we're not just using the main program, balanced literacy program, at Teachers College here in the US. It's spread to the UK. It's all over the place. And you know what? I have always been a reader. And so I agree with you. We don't throw books out. We don't throw beautiful literature out, but we need to get everyone to the place where they can read those books.
Or want to read, yes, or want to read. So it has to be, yeah. Like my daughter, believe it or not, Dr. Morrison taught at OSU. She also in Columbus had a literacy group that she was running through the Graham School, where they were teaching students Orton Gilliam, the methodology of Orton Gilliam. My daughter was fortunate enough to get 3 months free of services. And that's when the light bulb went off. That's when she was picking up books that she was interested in, sitting down and reading. Can't say that kids don't want to read, because some kids do. As long as it's interesting to them, they're going to pick it up and read it. The problem is do they have what it takes to be able to sit down and read it to themselves, or to enjoy a book that they enjoy? But we won't know that because they're not being taught at the lower levels of how to read. Some kids, my son has some points of dyslexia, but where I found that he overcame, it doesn't go away. It just is, it's hereditary. It just is what it is.
It's a lifelong condition.
It is. But he taught himself how to read by reading subtitles of movies and seeing what's going on. But he also, when The Hate You Give, when that book came out, I seen my child sit down and be super intrigued in reading a book that was like this thick. It didn't matter of the size of the book. It was interesting to him, and he decided he wanted to sit down and read it. Deliana went from not wanting to pick up a book and writing the same sentence over and over to make it seem as if she was participating in class, to not raising her hand, to picking up a series of Dogman books.
Awesome.
And reading them on her own, and wanting me to buy them, and wanting to go and rent them from the library. And so it, like I said, if you're given the pieces that you need to put the puzzle together, you're going to be able to do it, regardless if it's at your pace. They're still not comfortable reading out loud.
Right.
But still, they can sit down and do it themselves and read it. Like that was an eye opener. So it's not that they're not capable of doing it. They just need the techniques that aren't written in a book per se, of being taught, because I can read until I'm blue in the face, but if I don't understand how to apply it, I'm not going to do it. So I say that in the aspect of these teachers who are teaching our kids, they can read whatever's in a book, but they have to learn how to apply it. They are limited to what they can apply and not apply based on the structure of their contract, based on the structure of the administration, based on the structure of the district. So, and again, that has changed over time from when I was in school to when my kids were in school. And the revenues of how teachers are being taught changed over time. So that dynamic and them being put in this box, you have to teach the curriculum this way. You can't deviate, you can't change, you can't do anything. And if you do, you're in trouble. It's just not, it's not working. So
you are a leader. So I really hope that your message and you get out there as much as possible on a national level to change the conversation, because I don't care if a person is white or black, Native American, whatever ethnicity, if they're rich or poor, because the rich can get access to private tutoring and upper middle class, but we have to change this. So President Biden and also people that are really championing civil rights, this is the greatest civil rights issue of our time, I think.
it is. History repeats itself.
That's right.
And we're at a state of repeating, just on different levels. So
I want to show the audience, so stay with me. I'm going to share my screen, and this is the documentary that Joy participated in, appears in, and this is called Parents for Reading Justice. You can find this on YouTube, Our Dyslexic Kids. And so I'll just play a little bit of it.
That I can read, or that I learned differently than other kids around me, was probably in preschool. Not being able to like understand things and just like learning what words meant and how to spell them. So then you're just like left wondering, why can't I? Like what makes me, why am I different? Why can't I do things that most kids could?
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. So this cuts across every line. I'm going to also share with you, and Joy, tell me, can you see this picture on the New York Times?
I can.
Okay, so this is a New York Times article, and this is Joy Palmer and her daughter. And thank God for Joy Palmer fighting for her daughter and not being deterred, because she is making a huge difference. And she's well connected in many, many literacy circles. So the title of the article, here's another woman from Ohio who was a former teacher. She wasn't getting the help for her kid in the school district, which was a really wealthy school district, and she had to take matters into her own hands. So the title of this article, and I will also post it, is Kids Can't Read, the Revolt That Is Taking On the Education Establishment. And the author of this article is Sarah Mervosh. She published the article April 18th of this year. Joy, any final thoughts before we go?
The only one that I was going to say is definitely don't feel like you're by yourself. Reach out, ask questions. I can share my email. It's joypalmer81@gmail.com. If you don't know who to ask, you don't know how to ask it, feel free to reach out to me. And again, I don't know all the answers, but I do know a lot of people who have been at this fight for a long time who can definitely help, and I can get you linked up. I was going to tell you, Mary, the Parents to Read, subscribe to that Twitter account, because that is Brett Tingley. and that is definitely who you want. She just had a session in Chicago, and she's getting linked. And what she's trying to do is get people linked worldwide. So parents.
Is it TO or is it the number 2?
Which one?
For parents to read, that Twitter, was that the name of Brett Tingley? So Brett Tingley is the person who started this movement in Columbus, Ohio. And she was one of the people, I believe, who produced the
document. Yeah. Parents to read.
I'll find it. So Brett Tingley, Tingley, is the name of the woman who produced the documentary.
Yes.
And that's the problem, Joy. And then I'm gonna be quiet. But we have all these groups, disparate groups, working toward literacy. But we really need to join forces, and it needs to become a coalition.
Yeah, Parents for Justice is definitely, it's Parents for Reading Justice. It's the word for. That is her ultimate goal. And if you're on Twitter, it's at Parents for RJ. That is her ultimate goal, is getting the resources out for everybody and getting everybody linked in one spot. Because when I say I am linked and subscribed to, I don't know how many different groups and organizations when it comes to Facebook, but different schools have different things. Different people have other different things. So yes, to have one local spot to be able to reach out. And I know everybody doesn't do Twitter, is great, but I think they're also looking at doing some of the Instagram, Facebook, and some of your IDA branches, like COBIDA has a list of organizations on it too as well. I think Brett has that listed because she on Twitter, because she's trying to get all the pieces linked together. This is a big puzzle, and we need it. Once we get the whole puzzle together and get everybody on the same page, it's definitely going to evolve. It's definitely going to cause that change, because now it has to be changed.
Okay, give the audience your email again, and I will give my website information.
My email is joypalmer81@gmail.com. And the Twitter account is at Parents for the number 4 RU, and it's Parents for Reading Justice.
Excellent. And I have a website, and it's readkeys.com. And Read Keys, it's because we're trying to unlock this door for everyone on the planet. Joy Palmer, I cannot thank you enough for spending almost an hour with me, because you are really one of the most powerful speakers, because you've walked the walk, and your heart's in it, your brain is in it, your fight is in it. And I just couldn't be more grateful that we sat next to each other at a conference.
I know we met at the perfect time. Thank you.
So hang on, Joy, I'm just going to stop